Okay, how's the mic? Clear enough? Good? Okay. Better than last time. Oh, we still got a few minutes. I'm going to try to live stream this one. We will see how it goes. Does anybody want a handout for knowing your fat sources? You want to know about lipids in your food? Let's throw this science garbage away. We're talking about the humanities. Anybody got questions, comments, anything we want to go over while we wait for everybody else to show up?
I was wondering, so on 6.4, is that still do as many as you need to, or is that?
Yeah, the only thing I'll count as being due is just those 25. But I would say for the test, do as many as you can, or as many as you need to, yeah. But again, even with the 25, if you get it and you're close, move on. Yeah.
The test opens today.
Yeah, test should be open now. Yeah. Any questions on what will be on the test or anything like that?
When's it closing again? Next Tuesday?
Does anybody know the date? I thought I gave 9 days to do it.
30th.
Okay, 30th, yeah. 30th. It will cover a lot. So give yourself a lot of time for this test. It's long. Half of it's translations, half of it's truth tables. So I would say there's 9 truth tables. I think 2 or 3 of them are 16 lines. And then, I'll put it this way. The test is long because in my symbolic logic class, you cover less ground, but most of the same material. You just go beyond it for the second half of the semester, right? Whereas we do other stuff the second half. So this test is the first and second symbolic logic tests combined. So yeah, so it's 2 full-length tests in one. Now what that is good for is you can screw up a lot of problems and still do well, right? Because if you screw up an entire truth table, that might be equal points to a single translation. So it's kind of nice. But yeah, allot yourself a good amount of time for it. I don't think it's that hard. They're definitely not difficult problems compared to like the homework. But there are a lot of them. Yeah. Any other questions, comments on the test or anything?
When do we need to have 7.1 read by now with the new reading schedule?
Yeah, 7.1 won't start till after the test. I can't remember the exact date. The 5th? Yeah, that sounds about right. So what you need to have read is the chapter of David Hume's Inquiry into Human Understanding. And the chapter that I emailed this book out because I don't want to upload it to Canvas and get, sued, of Peter Lipton's book, Inference to the Best Explanation, Chapter 1, Introduction to Chapter 1. Both cover the same topics from different perspectives. Get those read. Get at least Hume read by this Thursday. And yeah, I will warn you, don't get discouraged reading Hume, even though he's a contemporary or modern English philosopher, so he writes in English. It is a little bit dense. It's not very long, but it is complicated. So give yourself time for that too. And take notes on it. Underline things. Don't get super discouraged. I will explain a lot of it to you. Yeah.
About that. So you sent out an announcement on Canvas that had one PDF in it. Which one was that? Hume?
That's Lipton.
And then Hume then is an email that you emailed us.
Hume?
No.
There's a link.
There's a link in the reading schedule. There's also a link on Canvas. Yeah, to Hume. Hume is an older writing, so it's not in copyright. So it's just, you can find that book free everywhere. Yeah.
Where is the new reading schedule?
It should just be on the homepage of Canvas.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah. The Lipton article, if you go to Z Library, that book's there, or PDF Drive, you can get the whole Lipton book. It's a great book if you're interested. The Hume book you can find on Project Gutenberg. Okay, let's get started. Any other questions?
Yes, on the test for the truth tables, are we gonna have to format those on Canvas?
No. So how the test will work is the truth table problems where I want you to upload a truth table. You will just take a picture of it. Yeah, each of those problems will have a separate Dropbox within the test. So just take a picture, upload it to your computer. I know it's a pain, but then put it on the Canvas.
No, that sounds a lot easier, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, yeah. It's a lot easier than having to somehow type it into Canvas essay box. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it should take PDF and JPEG. Don't give me weird file types. Like Mac users often give me .heic, which for normal people on a Mac works great. For Windows people, you have to pay 99 cents for a image viewer codec that decodes that and converts it to a JPEG, and I can never get it to work anyway, so even after I paid for it. So yeah, try to give a JPEG or PDF for those uploads there. Preferably JPEG.
With the truth tables, are you looking for like a correct end result or like the work or like a combination of the two?
Well, so the correct end result will be a result of the correct method and working through. So how it'll work is I'll have, let's say, I think it's question 9 will give you a formula, a well-formed formula, then it will say upload a truth table for this formula. 5 points. Okay, that's it. Just show me a truth table. If you demonstrate, even if you make a mistake or two, if you demonstrate that you understand how to do a truth table, you're golden. 5 points. Maybe four points if you make a big enough mistake that it affects you bad. Then question 10 will be, is that proposition or formula a tautology, contingent, self-contradiction? Then that's the end result that you're looking for. And then if you don't get that, then you don't get that points for that question. But you do get the truth table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just like for me, it's like sometimes like I'll do stuff in my head on the table, or I won't like write out all of the truths and falses for every single like say like for like a premise when it's like multiple
Right.
atomic statements. Do you want us to write that out, or do you want just the main ones, or?
So you definitely, what? This thing sucks so much. You definitely don't have to write, like you don't have to copy all of the individual letters down. I gotta get the other mic. Hold on. You don't have to copy the individual letters down, but I don't want you skipping major chunks of it, right? So, does that make sense what I'm saying? If you can just go straight from all of your combinations to, well, then the or statement here is true, great. But if you have to, but don't just write down like all your combinations, then your final column, if that makes sense. Even though it might be right, I want to see as much work as I can. Yeah. Any other questions on the test? Comments? Concerns? verbal diarrhea, actual diarrhea. Let's see if this might work. Well, oh my god, this thing sucks. Alright, hopefully that doesn't start crapping out again. We'll see. Okay, so today the only thing we really have to do is go over truth tables for arguments. Just review. Does anybody have problems you want to do? Anything you want to ask questions about? Then Thursday we'll start on material. If you're confident on all this, you're free to go. You don't have to be here if you don't feel you need to be.
I think you mentioned this earlier, but I might not have been here yet. So when do we have to have the test turned in?
It says on the reading schedule, I think it was the 30th. Yeah, 30th. And that will be the same for the homework packets too. Yes, okay. I don't know how to hand up first.
Can we just, talk about how we would translate number 9 on 6.4.1? It's the one about the USS Arizona and USS Missouri.
Yes, let me pull this up real quick. What was the section number again?
6.4.1. It's like the 10 just written arguments.
And what number?
Number 9.
Is it not B then not L for you?
No.
Okay, hold on, let me pull up my 13th edition PDF. Sometimes, I have like all the editions on PDF for some strange reason. Definitely not because it's an easy way to cheat making tests and just copy them from the older ones. But, either USS Arizona or USS Missouri was not sunk?
Yes.
Okay. So, the prompt here is translate the following arguments into symbolic form, then determine whether each is valid or invalid by constructing a truth table for each. Okay, Sophia, what are you uncomfortable with here? Just the translation part, the truth table part, both?
It was just the translation. Since it has the either and the nots, I just wanted to double check.
Right. So, here's a little cheat sheet. Either or, even if you don't have the or there, will almost always equal or, right? Unless, we've talked about this at length, will typically mean something is necessary or sufficient for something. So if I say X unless Y, the most straightforward way to remember how to translate this is that unless Y happens, or I'm sorry, X will happen unless Y happens. So that means if X ended up happening, then Y must not have happened. Okay? Or put it another way, if Y happens, then X won't happen. Obviously we know and, I don't think I need to write and down. Neither nor is just a negation like that. I'll put either or up here. Not both. What does not both mean? Somebody tell me, what's not both mean?
One or the other, but not both. Right?
It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? It could be, but definitely not both. Not both together, yeah. But maybe it's one or the other, we just don't know. Maybe it's neither, but at least, at the very least, not both of them. These are the troubling, like, phrases in English that give people a lot of problems, I think. So I'll just put them real quick. So now looking at number 9 again, we have either the USS Arizona or the USS Missouri was not sunk in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Therefore, it is not the case that either the USS Arizona or the USS Missouri was sunk in the attack on Pearl Harbor. How do you think we translate this? Again, here's premise one. Either the USS Arizona or the USS Missouri was not sunk in the attack on Pearl Harbor.
I'm sorry, which chapter was this again? I'm trying to find this from.
6.4.1, number 9.
I think it would be like not A, wedge, not M for the first one.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I put.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So, I think those were the letters.
Yeah.
So what that says is A and M represent the Arizona and Missouri were sunk. And the negations are that didn't happen, they weren't sunk. Right? So that's perfect. That's our first premise. Our second premise, or I guess it's just the conclusion, therefore it's not the case that either the USS Arizona or the USS Missouri was sunk in the attack on Pearl Harbor.
So would it just be negation parentheses A wedge M?
So this said, let's see exactly, it says either one of these wasn't sunk. So this wasn't sunk or this wasn't sunk, maybe both. The second one is, it's not the case that either of them, right? Now this means one of them could have still sunk, right? Can one of them sink with this one? No, right. Because this is saying it's not the case that even one of these happened. So again, neither nor or just neither means not either of them happened. Not either, right? So if that's our argument, right? Valid or invalid?
Invalid.
Invalid. Raise your hand if you think invalid. Raise your hand if you think valid. Let's see what the truth of the matter is, right? Should be a short truth table. What's my first step for an argument truth table? What do?
Atomic statements.
Atomic statements. A, M. Do I need to write negation A and M separately?
No.
No. We have all the information we need built into these, right? Because they're just opposites. Premise 1, not A or not M. Premise 2, not A or M. Wow, that's a bad parenthesis. Boom. How do I get my combinations? How many rows of combinations do I have?
4.
Why? Why 4?
2 to the n power.
2 to the n power. N power is 2 atomic statements, so I'm going to have 4. True, true, false, false. True, false, true, false. What makes an or true?
If one of the statements, at least one of the statements.
At least one of them are true, right? So this was true. So what's this? What's negation? False? So the opposites will go when this is false.
It's true.
Then that's true. Good. Just the opposites. Same for this one. I won't make us repeat them ad nauseum. Ad nauseum is what pretentious people say when they talk about being bored by something. Okay, so both false. What's the or?
False.
One false, one true.
True.
One true, one false.
True.
Both true.
True.
Beautiful. Okay, now coming over here, what do we work first here? Inside the parentheses, we want to know if this whole thing right here is true. Do you want me to copy everything over, or are we good? Anybody need me to copy? Okay. So A or M, what makes it true again?
One of them is true.
One of them. So A and M are both true?
True.
One true, one false?
True.
One false, one true?
True.
Both false. Good, okay. Now, if this whole thing's true, what's this?
False.
What does this apply to? The whole thing. Can you distribute this inside?
No.
No, it doesn't make any sense in terms of meaning, right? So this whole thing is true, so this is false. It's false, so it's
True.
okay, cool. So where's my erasers? The last classroom I taught in had a cool like magnetic cloth that like was an eraser, and I just kept throwing it at the board and trying to erase things. It was cool. I want one for this classroom. Okay. So this is our only premise. Conclusion. what's the definition of valid and invalid?
The premises are true, but the conclusion is false.
Right, so for invalid, basically what that means is there's no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee that even if the premises are true, the conclusion would be true. It could be that even if they were all true, the conclusion could still be false, right? So you know it's invalid by looking at what?
Where the premises are true. And
So a row, there is at least one row that
that all premises are true, and the conclusion is false.
all premises equal true and conclusion equals false. Valid, whenever premise is true, conclusion equals true as well. True?
Would,
False?
hold on,
Yeah.
would valid also be premises false, conclusion false, or premises false, conclusion true?
Yeah, so this, again, hypothetical. So this is just saying, if the premises were all true, then the conclusion would be true. There's some arguments where the premises can't all be true. What would that look like? What would that be? Why would the premises not all be able to be true?
If the argument was like unsound.
Mm-mm.
If it
If it
was contradictory.
was contradictory. If you had an argument where, let's say, the first premise says P then Q, second premise says P, third premise says not P, right? This is a contradiction within the argument. These premises can't all be true at the same time. So technically it's valid, just because it's not invalid. But it's unsound, because you'll never be able to have all true premises. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay, so true here, false. What does it make it? Invalid, right? Yep. So even though the premises are true here and true there, it's still not a guarantee, right? Questions? I know that was a basic one. But how's everybody feeling about this stuff? Good? Are there any more problems we want to do, particular ones, or just things we want to go over, talk about?
Some of them from 6.3 yeah, 6.3.3. Some of them, like, it was just, it like asked about like what the truth table says about the argument, and sometimes I felt like I wasn't clear on like
Yeah,
what it was saying.
I think these are stupid, how these are worded. Like, what can we say about Carlson's prediction? What they want you to do is do one of two things. They want you to either treat whatever they're saying as a gigantic conjunction, translate what they're saying, and then treat it as one big thing and see, are everything they're saying combined into one big and statement? Is it a tautology, a self-contradiction, or is it contingent? Or take the individual parts of what they're saying and see if they are logically equivalent to each other, etc. Right? So the two approaches are, let's just look at, I won't test you on anything like this, but let's just look at number 8. I like theology. Number 8. Eric Carson sums up his beliefs about God as follows. God exists if and only if either life is meaningful or the soul is not immortal. God exists and the soul is immortal. If God exists, then life is not meaningful. Is it possible that Eric's beliefs make sense? What it's asking you to do is ask you, do all of these different statements cohere with one another, right? Now, this is before arguments, right? That's clearly an argument. So if we were in 6.4, we would ask, is that a valid argument? But because it's before we've learned this, they clearly want something else, right? So let's just do this. Let's just say with this one, let's practice translating it real quick. And then let's do the 3 different types of truth tables on it. Let's treat it all as one big thing, and then let's treat it as individual things, propositions, and then let's treat it as an argument, which won't be much extra work. Okay, so 6.3.1. 3, number 8. Does anybody know how to translate this? God exists if and only if either life is meaningful or the soul is not immortal.
So for that, I have G double arrow, parentheses, L wedge, negation S.
So God exists if and only if life is meaningful or the soul is immortal, not. The soul is not immortal. Good, okay, that's right. God exists and the soul is immortal.
This one is really tough, but I put G and S.
Real tough. G and S, yeah, that's right. Last claim, if God exists, then life is not meaningful.
So that one I have G arrow, negation L.
Okay, just right off the bat, if this is going to be an argument, this argument seems like it's self-contradictory in some way, right? On the one hand, you're saying, well, God exists only if, well, life is meaningful or the soul is not immortal. I guess it's not technically self-contradictory, but it seems kind of like, why would you say that one of the conditions for God existing is that life is meaningful, and then also if God exists and life isn't meaningful? Technically, we'll see it's consistent, but let's put it on a truth table and see exactly the relationships. So I've got 3 letters. I've got G, L, S. Ooh, that's better than normal. I've got G, if and only if, L or not S. I've got G and S. Finally, I have G, then not L. Okay. I don't want to confuse anybody, but I'm going to. If I tell you, if I list off a bunch of things to you, and I say, well, 1, I really like cats. 2, I hate dogs. 3, I am teaching. Doesn't have to be anything interesting, just mundane shit. I could list these off to you, right? And when I list them off, when I claim that they're true, I'm saying this is true, and this is true, and this is true. If I get rid of the numbers and want to symbolize my ands, what do? Instead of listing these 3 things out in a list of separate propositions, I say, this is true, and this is true, and this is true. So I can just say, I like cats and dogs, and I'm teaching. And then make it a well-formed formula. So if you list off a bunch of things and claim they're true, you can just join them into one big fat conjunction, right? This guy, whoever Eric Carson is that Dr. Carson, the conservative, like, neuroscientist or whatever? I don't know. Anyway, he lists off these 3 things. Now we could take them as a list of 3 things, or we could just join them all together with ands. If I join them all together with ands, and consider everything he's saying as one big proposition, all I have to do is put an and there, and an and there. And now this is just a truth table for one big fat juicy proposition. Okay, so let's just practice then doing the truth table for this proposition. How many rows am I going to have? 8. So I'll go 4 true, 4 false. 2 true, 2 false. And then 1 true, 1 false till we get to 8. All right. Let me make this a little bit more clear with a better bracket. little bit. Okay, yeah. So my main operator is just right here. So I'm basically looking at, can what this guy says, taken as one big thing, can it ever be true? Is it really a self-contradiction? Or could it be true, could it be false, right?
How did you decide that that one was gonna be the main operator? Second hand?
So join these together, right? This is one big thing, so I need to represent that this is one big thing here, right? So that has to be grouped together. This is one thing, so that has to be grouped together. I'm going to join these with an and. So I just put the and here, and then I'm going to have to group this together and the and here. Now, it doesn't matter if I make this whole thing the left side, or if I put the brackets here and make this whole thing the right side.
It doesn't matter.
It's just, it's like if I say to you, I like cats and I hate dogs and I am teaching. And I say, I like cats and I hate dogs and I am teaching. What's the difference between that and I like cats and I hate dogs and I am teaching? Does that make sense? The parentheses are to make it a well-formed formula, but it doesn't really change the content in this case.
Would it change it at all if it wasn't just and, like if you had ors and stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah, arrows, ors, things like that, it definitely changes. If you mix ands and ors and change the parentheses, this is completely different than this. This says at least one of these and this is true. This says this or both of these. Very different meanings. Does that make sense? But in terms of...
But I guess that's not really a problem we have to deal with, because whenever you're looking at arguments, it's always going to be an and. Whenever you're combining.
Right, yeah. And this isn't something I'll make you do in the test. It's just, this problem is stupid because it can be taken either way. And it's like they never teach you to do this, but. Okay, so let's start with G if and only if L or not S. Copy this down. False, true, false, true, false, true, false, true. Let's just look. When is an or true? At least one. So L is true, not S is false. What's it make the whole thing? L is true, so it gives me at least one. L is false, not S is false, so it's false. I have at least one. False because neither of them are true. That's true. That's true. That's true. All right.
The second to last one, I think.
Second to last one?
Yeah, I think that one's false.
False. Oh, you're right. Yep, I was looking at S. You're right. Nice. Good catch. Okay. When is an if and only if true?
If both sides are the same.
Both sides have to match, they have to be the same. So G is true and this is true. Do they match? That is true. True and true, true. True and false.
False.
True and true.
True.
False and false.
True.
False and true.
False.
False and false. And then false and true.
False.
Good. Okay. I'm just going to ignore that. Oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that. Oh well. Doesn't matter. Okay, G and S. When is an and true?
If both are true and true.
Okay, so true and true?
It's true.
True and false?
False.
True and what the hell? True and true? God, that's slanted.
True.
True false?
False.
False true.
False.
Let me stand back. Which one am I on? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. False and true?
False.
False and false?
False.
And false and false.
False.
Wait. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It doesn't matter. It'll be the same answer anyway. Screw my lines. Okay, G then not L. Again, I'm just going to write the opposite of L. Right? Yes. Okay. What makes the arrow false? What's the only way it's false?
If it's a true premise and a false conclusion.
True premise, false conclusion. So, G is true, not L is false?
So false.
Good, false. False again. True, true.
False.
The rest of it true.
My brain is having a hard time keeping up with my
No,
hand.
you're right. It's true actually. Sorry.
You led me astray, Judas. False and false.
It's true.
False and true.
It's still true.
False and true, true. Cool. Alright, now we can look at these big ands. Let's do this and first. True and true?
True.
True and false?
Before we do that real quick, can we double check row 5 for the G if and only if? Cause I think I got false and looking at it again.
Yeah, I got false too.
Those are
I
false.
didn't do that.
Yeah, because they're slanted real bad. False, true. You're right, false. Good catch. Okay, true and true? True and false?
False.
Good, false and true.
False.
True and false.
False.
False and false.
False.
False and false.
False.
True and false.
False.
False and false.
False.
Beautiful. Okay, last one. We're looking here, we're looking here. True and false. False and false. False and true. False and true is false, 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 false. What's that tell you about what he says?
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. It's a self-contradiction, right? Did I mess this up somehow? I feel like it's not a
I
self-contradiction.
didn't get the self-contradiction.
What?
Yeah, I got that it was consistent.
You got that it's consistent? I feel like it is consistent. But that means one of our lines is messed up somewhere. Where is it messed up?
Change something.
Oh God, I don't want to do this.
I didn't get any where all three were true.
Yeah, I got inconsistent.
Yeah, now that I look at it again, because I did change something, it is inconsistent. So,
So remember, this is one big proposition, so it's not going to be labeled consistent, inconsistent. Tautology, self-contradiction, or contingent. In this case, it doesn't make any sense, so it's a self-contradiction. But I feel like it's not really a self-contradiction, so I want to check real quick where we might have gotten this wrong. False. Oh God, I'm gonna have to redo the entire thing, aren't I? Oh no. L or S, that's true. That's true. That's true. That's false. That's true. That's true. That is true. False and false. Oh, not true. Yeah. So.
and I'll review my table. It was consistent before I fixed it.
False.
I'm just glad these are completion based.
False. False. True. False. True. True. Okay, so that side checks out. G and S. True. False. True. False. Wait. True. False. True. Ah, there's the fuck up. True. False. True. False. My God, I wrote this so bad. False. False. True. Man, I'm like not good at spatial stuff. false. Jeez. False, false, false. Okay, that's fine. Then G, then not L. True, false, false, true, false, false, true, 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 false, false, true, false, false, true, false, true, true, false, true, true, so that's fine. And then you look at here, and you look here. True, false, sorry, true, false, 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 true, 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 false. Okay, so everything checks out. So I think it is a self-contradiction. I was just wrong at first because I did. See, that's why you need truth tables. Okay, so it's self-contradiction. We don't have to redo any of our work, thank God. We just have to make it, now, let's split it into 3 different propositions. Now I'm interpreting it as 3 different propositions. And my question is, what's the relationship between all of these 3? Can they all 3 be true at the same time? Let's look. This is true, that's false. Nope. True, false, false. Nope. False, true, true. Nope. True, false, false. There again. True, false, true. Is that right? Nope. True. Still not all true. False, false, true.
The rest of them are false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first way of interpreting it is self-contradiction. Second way of interpreting it is 3 different things. What is it?
Inconsistent.
Yes, inconsistent. Right.
Okay.
Good. Okay, now, if we interpret it as an argument, what is it?
Invalid.
You sure?
Wait,
It has true, false.
yes, cause the first row.
Yeah. Good. Now, do you think this is really what you'd conclude from this?
No.
He's just rambling, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, that's typical of most people.
I think that's why they presented it as not an argument, because like those are probably like the premises, and then like there's some other conclusion.
Yeah, cause I would think he would have therefore in like this long complicated all 3.
You would think you'd have therefore. Really? Like, when is the last time you got to an argument and someone was like, therefore, outside of school? Like, I don't know. At least in my household growing up, that's how people argued. They just toss the kitchen sink full of bullshit at you and be like, now you agree with me. Okay. Questions? I think it seems like we're all pretty good on truth table stuff.
Yeah.
What time is it? Time do we get out? 2:40?
2:45.
2:45. Okay, well, we got a lot of time. Anybody have other problems you want to go over? Anything in particular, or should we just call it quits?
I had a question just about the reading schedule.
Yeah.
So on the last few days, it just says like read truth table study sheet. Is that like something we need to upload in the homework packet, or is that just
Did it say do truth table study sheet or read?
read?
Yeah, no, that's uploaded to Canvas. It's just something I wrote to help you guys. Just look at that for just like help if you're really behind truth table. So it's a more clear explanation than the book, in my opinion. Right. Yeah. Any other questions?
You said the longest truth table on the test is 16 rows, correct?
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think I gave you 32.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have the reading schedule pulled up? Can you tell me how many days do we have assigned for the Hume and Lipton articles? It should be titled The Nature of Inquiry.
Well, it's due with homework packet 2, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have technically until the 5th.
How many lecture days is that? Is that 3 or 4?
Three.
3, okay.
Is this one-page summary of both reading together, or two summaries, two total summaries?
Both together. So they both cover the same material, just one, from different perspectives. So sum up the material that you learn and give me your thoughts on it and try to actually figure out what exactly the problem is. I'll give you a hint on what we're going to be reading. We're basically going to be looking at a philosophical problem that threatens to completely devastate everything we do, theoretically, right? So if this philosophical problem does not have a solution, science is bullshit, philosophy is bullshit except for the deductive parts of it. Everything that's not based on deductive inference that you can put in a truth table goes out the window. None of that can be knowledge, none of it can be justified, right? So I want you to, in that one page, or more, you can write more if you want, really wrestle with this problem as you understand it in the readings, right? Describe what the problem is, and maybe even list off a couple solutions if you can think of any. Most likely won't be able to think of any solutions because there might not be any, I don't know. So I think there probably are solutions, but they're very weird. So yeah, that's what I want you to do with that little homework writing assignment. So 1 page total.
Is that acting as our honors component, kind of?
No, what will act as your honors component is, since we're getting into this sooner, I am going to be assigning you even more difficult readings the last 3 weeks of the semester. So the last 3 weeks of the semester, the readings I have now assigned on there are helpful, but they're kind of boring. The readings but they're like textbook readings, so they're really dry, and they're kind of technical, but it's like reading this Hurley textbook. It's just not that fun. So I think I'll replace them with actual philosophical readings on this problem, which will be more challenging, but it will be way less dry and boring. Yeah, that will be the honors component. We get into it early, that means we have more time. Yay! Okay, any more questions?
About I guess the reading schedule is more accurate now than on the homework listing for packet 2. We should be going off the reading schedule, not what's on the homework packet 2 assignment.
Yeah, sometimes there's typos. Sometimes there's not typos. There's 2 editions of the book, and I used one for one and one for the other. If you get, I think you're probably referencing 6.3.1 and 2 or something like that, where on the syllabus I say, do problems 6.3.1 number 1 through 10 or something like that. But then there's actually 15, but then I say 6.3.2, do 1 through 15, and there's only 10. With that type of stuff, if there's a typo, don't worry about it. Just do a bunch of the problems entirely. Yeah, I don't care. If you do 10 in each, I don't give a shit, right? Other questions? Since we have so much time, let me set the groundwork for what you're going to read and bring to class having read Thursday, right? This Hume article. I would like, stop calling me, everybody's calling me. I would like everybody to have both read, but if you just read Hume, that's the more important thing to really spend your time on, is this chapter from Hume. Because it is one of the most famous problems of philosophy, but it also, this Hume chapter defines and spawns entire fields of study. So philosophy has never been the same since this, but also any scientist, any historian who is interested in the methodologies of their discipline it's been fundamentally reshaped by this. And it's called Hume's problem of induction. I won't give a full lecture on it, but just setting the groundwork. What is induction versus deduction?
It's just probabilistic, so.
It's
the
probabilistic,
conclusion is
yeah.
more likely, but
So with a deductive argument, right, we have our premises, and then we have our conclusion, and again, there's a relationship between the premises and conclusion such that what? What's this relationship here between premises and conclusion? A guarantee. A relationship of logical necessity. If these things are true, this has to be true, right? There's no room for error. Well, but what about induction? Well, we have premises, we have a conclusion, we have a relationship. What's this relationship?
It only suggests a conclusion.
Suggests or makes probable. Another way to say that is it justifies the conclusion. If you've never taken a philosophy class before, you've probably heard the word justifies or warrant, right? Like that conclusion, that inference is warranted. But the question on what justifies your beliefs, what the relationship between evidence and a belief system or conclusion or hypothesis is or should be to be justified is really complicated, right? There's still no real good theory on exactly what justification is. It's so fundamental to all of the human disciplines. So right off the bat, you've got a problem here with induction. You have the question, WTF is justification? Not just what is justification, but what is probability? And how do premises or pieces of evidence justify a conclusion without guaranteeing it? Right? So Hume raises these problems. He says, look, we know deduction is fine. Because the very nature of deduction is if these are true, this has to be true. We get that. There's no real doubt that if it's a cat, then it's a mammal. It's a cat, therefore it's a mammal. Right? Good argument. But if I say that the sun has risen every day in past experience, therefore the sun will rise again tomorrow, we all feel that that's a good argument, right? It doesn't guarantee anything. But when I say sun has always risen, therefore sun will rise tomorrow, there's no guarantees here, even though we feel like this makes this probable, right? Raise your hand if you think, yeah, this makes this probable. Would anybody disagree that this does not make this probable? How so?
They seem like they're connected, but they aren't.
Why?
Just because something's always happened doesn't guarantee it's gonna happen again. Like, if I always brush my teeth in the morning, it doesn't mean I'm gonna brush my teeth tomorrow morning.
Okay, right. So, but what about if I give you, I think this argument appeared on the first test, someone has run every single day of their life, except for when it's raining or snowing. It's not raining or snowing, and there's no other reason to think that they're not going to run today. Does that at least make it better than 50% chance that they're going to run today? It doesn't have to be a strong belief. It just has to be 51% is the idea, right? It gives some sort of evidence, right? Well, what if I give you this? And here's the thing, I think you're absolutely correct, both of you. The issue is that if you're correct, we're all fucked, right? To be frank. Because if I'm a historian or an archaeologist, let's say this is Hume's example, I go to a deserted island and I find on this island a pocket watch. So I could say something like, there's a pocket watch on this island. All other pocket watches are man-made. Therefore, my conclusion, what can I conclude from this about this island? People have been there before me, right? So there were once people here. Right? There were once people on the island. Do these two lines of reasoning give evidence for this?
Yeah, kinda. But you could always say like it washed ashore or
Sure.
it got dropped by a bird or something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So the problem is you're absolutely right. But if you're absolutely right, there's no such thing as a deductive argument in reconstructing history. All historical proofs are reconstructions like this, where you're going from an observation to basically a prediction of what the past was like. But whenever you make a prediction about anything, you never have a guarantee because you can always come up with competing explanations. Maybe a bird dropped it. I think Hume says this elsewhere. Maybe it's just a rock that somehow got lucky and became a pocket watch.
Do you think that deductive arguments vary, like, cultural-wise? Because I feel like we all have the same thought process, and that's why, like, we deduct the same things, but that doesn't mean another culture would. Because I feel like there's always, like, underlying things in deductive arguments that, you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, so your question, you're basically asking, are rules of deductive inference universal? So we'll learn this in 7.1. If I have a structured argument that looks like this, is this a universal rule that all cultures and all people believe this is a good way of reasoning? P then Q, P so Q. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I guess it's just like what like makes P and Q true or false is what I feel like would be culturally different sometimes.
Right, so there's the question of is P true, right? Different cultures and different people might have different opinions. But then there's the question of, regardless of if it's actually true, if these two things were true, would it guarantee this?
Yeah.
I think this is probably universal. Can we prove it? Probably not, unless we did some sort of weird survey of all people in history. But as long as philosophers and people have been writing, they reason, especially like this, right? So I think this is strongly ingrained into human reason. Now, what's even more obvious, though, is that strongly ingrained into human reason is this type of reasoning. Predictive reasoning. Now, predictions can either be predictions of the future, or they could be predictions of how things were in the past. Right? That's what theory is, and I'll talk about this more. But the question is, whereas universally we seem to understand this as good, someone like Sophia can raise the objection, aren't there a bunch of other explanations? There's no guarantee here. And if there's no guarantee, then can we really have this sort of knowledge based on this type of probabilistic, hypothetical reconstruction of history or prediction? If not, bye-bye to history. People always say things like, philosophers have their head in the clouds. Philosophers deal with these abstract notions. I gotta tell you, philosophers deal with a lot of things that don't rely on this. So if anything, if Hume's problem of induction is right, philosophers and mathematicians and geometers are the only ones that actually have justified beliefs and knowledge, because we use deduction a lot. So the problem is not that I'm trying to argue that philosophy is the only good discipline, it's just that in order to save the idea that science, that human reasoning, can tell us things that aren't just certain, and that we can actually have probabilistic knowledge, and give probabilistic arguments, we're gonna have to deal with Hume's problems and objections to this type of argument. Does that make sense? Now again, his objection, and we'll get into this more, is just, there's no guarantee. So what is knowledge? What is justification other than a guarantee that you know this is true? And it's really hard to say exactly what it would be. We have this intuitive notion of probability, but we don't really know what probability is. And again, the issue is it's not just about history, but prior to human modern civilization, you would have somebody, let's say, running from a lion or a tiger in Africa, right? And they say, I've seen lions and tigers before, I know I can't outrun them. Is that a guarantee? No. An argument like that would be something like, all other tigers I've seen were faster than me. Conclusion, tiger's faster than me. This tiger's faster than me. So I can't outrun it. That's exactly the same type of argument. So if you're right, even these human beings who are living in these hunter-gatherer societies, even before we get into complicated stuff like philosophy, they might be using this to survive, but even these type of arguments don't really seem justified. Does that make sense? It's a weird problem because it runs completely counter to all of our intuitions. But now, and this is what turns people into philosophers, is they say, so all of science, all of history, anything that's not certain and deductive, I know you're not gonna read Hume's problem and just give up on all of it, right? And I know that 99% of you aren't going to become philosophers and study this for the rest of your life and find the answer, right? So the foundation of your belief system is going to be a sort of faith. A faith that these types of inferences, these types of probabilistic arguments work well. That they do give us justification. Because if they didn't, then everything would have just been kind of like a bizarre waste of time and like us just making shit up to survive. Which, some people say that, and they become nihilists or skeptics for these types of reasons. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Okay, we'll get into the details next time. But just remember that like this is a problem that when you start reading into the Hume, it's 70% of the way through an entire book. So the background is he's wondering about this sort of question, and he's going to give arguments for why he thinks this is an irresolvable problem. And everything outside of math and philosophy is, like basic philosophy, is pretty much just unjustified, made up conjecture and guessing, essentially, not knowledge. Questions?
When did Hume come up with his problem?
Oh God, I'm so bad at the history of philosophy, like the timeline. 1700s? Let me look up what date Inquiry was published. Oh, come on, phone.
This is like the beginning of one of those really dramatic documentaries where they like question everything.
I would love to make a short film or something about this. I don't know how you'd make it interesting. 1748, the book that you're about to read came out. And it was a summary of a longer book that nobody liked. That was like 700 pages, and he condensed it into like 150 or something like that. So yeah, mid-1700s.
So, like, era of enlightenment?
Oh, yeah. Hume is the culmination. That's the thing. When we talk about the Enlightenment is post-Renaissance. So it goes Middle Ages, the Age of Faith, Renaissance, which is kind of everybody, it's still the Age of Faith, but they're taking on all these new theories and the new methods of science. Empiricism is discovered. And then the Enlightenment takes empiricism and runs with it, to where the Enlightenment philosophers often thought the only way you actually have knowledge is from empirical observations of the physical world. Well, the problem is Hume develops that, and inquiry into human understanding develops a whole theory about the physical world is the only real route to knowledge, observations are how we get all our knowledge. Well, if observations are how we get all knowledge, then our arguments are all going to look like this, because they're all going to be based on past observation. Well, if all arguments from past observation to future or past predictions are problematic, then Hume's entire theory, the entire Enlightenment consensus on empiricism, boom, done, gone, right? Or maybe it's true, and the empiricists just end up undermining science and history and all that. So that's like the historical context for this, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, get ready to,
This is like my midnight, like,
Yeah.
existential crisis.
this is the most fun thing. I don't condone drug use at all. I'm not like a drug user. But getting really drunk or like smoking and getting like super high and then just like thinking about this is like a formative part of undergrad. Okay. Yeah, this is what really got me into logic too. Because some people have thought that you could like solve this just by reducing all of these type of arguments to deduction. And I looked into that for years, and I was like, this is just all bullshit. So then, now we're back here. But, okay, questions, comments, anything? Okay, get ready for this crazy reading, and we will dive into this in more detail soon. Goodbye, everybody. See ya.